there, I'm Holly from Crafty Bun Studio, and today we're going to be doing multicoloured monoprinting. So you all have a stock image in your packs, and then we're going to turn it into a multicoloured monoprint using yellow and green ink. I hope you all enjoy it, and I look forward to seeing the results of your printmaking session. I'm just going to share with you a few photos from previous workshops to show what can be achieved with multicoloured monoprinting. The first thing you need to do is, using the stock image you've been given or your own design, we're going to trace over the part that we want for our print. Use a little bit of tape to stick the two together to stop it wiggling around. Once you've finished the drawing, what we need to think about next is the colour that we're going to use first. In your packs, you're going to have two colours to use for this monoprinting session. And the colour that we want to use first is the lightest colour, so that's going to be the yellow. So I'm going to have a think about which bits of my drawing I want to be yellow. And then once I'm ready, I'm going to get my ink. So you want a blob of ink, not much bigger than a 1p coin. You don't need loads of ink for monoprinting. In fact, you want to have quite a thin layer. So it's better to start off with too little and add more if you need to. So then I'm going to get my roller, and we're going to drag the ink downwards. So, spreading that out. And I'm going to turn the roller and start rolling back and forth in the other direction. I want to get the ink roughly the right size to be able to cover parts of my image that I need. So about A4 size. When you're done with your roller, you've got a little rest on the back, so you can pop that down without getting ink on the table. So what I'm going to do next is use a bit of masking tape. I'm going to just put a bit of tape along the top of my perspex here, just so it doesn't move around whilst I'm drawing. So what you need to do is get a bit of your scrap newspaper and tear off a sheet. And we're just going to blot the ink that we've just rolled out. And this is just to make sure that there isn't too much ink down on the surface, because otherwise you might end up with blobs of ink on your final print where you don't want them. It needs to be a really nice thin layer of ink. Rub firmly all over the back of that. Just do that one more time. We've got quite a nice thin layer of ink now. So next thing you'll need is your sheet of cartridge paper. And my drawing is portrait, so I'm going to turn my image around. You want to get it quite central over your ink as well. And we're going to get another little bit of tape. Place that down there. So now that you've placed your piece of cartridge paper down, you mustn't press on the back of the paper because otherwise you'll make smudges where the ink is. So next you'll need your image that you've traced. And you must remember when you're doing printmaking that if you want the image to come around the original way that you drew it, you're going to have to flip over your tracing paper, like so. This is particularly important if you've incorporated some text. So it'll be backwards at the moment, but once your print comes out, it'll flip it back the right way. So we're just going to place that down over the top of our paper. I'm going to put mine a bit more in the middle here, a little bit over to the right. And then a bit more tape. Stick that down. It's really important that we stick down all the layers when we're doing a multicoloured monoprint, and you'll see why in a little while. So next what we're going to have to do is take our coloured biros and the main thing to remember now is whilst we're drawing over the lines that we want to come out in yellow, we mustn't rest our hand down on the paper because otherwise that will smudge our print. We just want the pen end to be touching the paper. And you don't need to apply loads of pressure, just as much as you would when you're normally drawing. And a trick that I use to keep myself from resting down, so I put my spare arm down on the table and then I rest my wrist over the top of that arm. And that just allows me to have a bit more control and means I don't forget to not rest my hand down. You will find it's a bit tricky initially to get your lines nice and straight, but I think it all adds to the character of the drawing. And you'll find as you go along, it gets steadier. So I'm just going to draw around all the lines that I want to be yellow. I'm going to do my sunflower head. And then I think I'm going to do the tops of my poppy in yellow as well. So now I've done all the lines that I wanted to add the yellow into, but I'm just going to have a little check and see if there's any other areas that I want to add it on. Peel back the paper as well, and then you can see what we've been drawing so far. So you can see that sunflower head and the poppy heads over here as well. But I think I want to add in some shading, especially onto these petals. So one trick for doing shading is you can either use your biro to scribble in the details, and that gives you quite a nice dense amount of shading. Or if you want something a bit softer, I'd recommend using your little finger. And then you can just press down a little onto the ink. You need to press relatively firm just to pick up as much ink as you can. Alternatively, if you find it a bit difficult using your finger, if you've got any cotton buds at home, those also have a similar impact. So it just allows you to apply pressure, but not too intensely. And then I'm going to add in some of these fine lines on the petals using my biro. And then I think what I'm going to do for these little petals that are behind, I'm just going to scribble those in with my biro, so they'll be quite nice and dense yellow. One last thing I'm going to do whilst I've got the yellow down is just add a little bit of yellow to the main poppy heads here. So I'm going to softly rub over the inside of this line. And peel back the layers again, have a look. So you can see where I've added in the shading on the stems here with the cotton bud. And then also on the sunflower as well. So what we're going to do next is go on to the next colour of our print. So we want to keep them all taped down at the top here. And we're just going to peel these back so they're out the way. A good way of cleaning off your previous ink is you can use some baby wipes or just a wet cloth as well. And the good thing about these is because they're water-based, they clean off quite nice and easily. Just be careful when you're cleaning to not get any water on your print that's still taped down at the top. So once you feel like you've got that cleaned off enough, you can either just wait for it to dry naturally or just use a bit of kitchen roll just to dry it off, because we don't want any moisture left on the perspex because that will interact with the next layer of ink that we put down. I'm just going to dry this off with some kitchen roll. So remember, for your next bit of ink, you don't need much at all, about the size of a 1p piece. So then we're going to roll out the green ink onto the perspex. And I haven't cleaned my roller from the previous time, but I think I'm just going to incorporate the yellow that's left on there into the green anyway. So you don't need to worry too much. If you think the colours will go quite well together and blend, then there's no need to really clean the roller in between. If you wanted to, again, just using some warm water in the sink do the job nicely. I'm just going to roll the ink out like we did before. I'm going to grab some more scrap loose paper. And we're going to blot our ink again. Don't want any big green splodges where they're not wanted. I'm going to do that one more time with a fresh bit of newspaper. So once you've blotted your ink, you can see there's a bit of transparency to it now. So I'm going to pop my paper back down. It's still attached with masking tape and my tracing as well. Remember, you don't want to press your hands down at this point because otherwise you'll end up with ink where you don't want it. So I can see the areas that I haven't drawn over already. So I'm just going to go around where I wanted the green to come out on this print. So on the stems and the leaves and on the rest of the poppy heads here as well. So I've gone over all the initial lines that I wanted to be in green. So I'm just going to have a little peek and see if there's anywhere else that I want to add a bit more shading into. Peel back the tracing, peel back the paper. And you can see where I've added all that green into the print. And I think what I'm going to do is use the green to just bring forward some more of these details, maybe around the edge of the petals here and in the poppy heads. So I think I'm just going to do that with my biro. Maybe add a bit more shading in on the stems down here as well. All right, so I've gone over all the lines that I wanted to, and I've been checking it as I go along as well. So there we go. We've got a yellow and green monoprint. So you can see where I've added in just the extra details with the green to give it more definition, because the yellow was quite a lot paler. So it's entirely up to you how much you want to embellish your prints and add shading in where you feel like it's needed. But the main thing is to just have fun.